newscasters are gay, honey, with Luke Goodhart.
And Sean Madrid. It's 5 p.m. on Wednesday, March 15th, and we're coming to you live from the Creative Tucson studio in downtown Tucson. First, the local headlines.
Thank you, Sean. As the federal immigration crackdown continues across the U.S., city officials in Arizona are maintaining that they have a duty to protect their residents and help them feel safe. Tempe Council member Joel Navarro said that he wants residents to enjoy their quality of life and that to do so, people shouldn't feel like they're being harassed or targeted. Navarro spoke at a National League of Cities events where city officials discussed how they could rise above the discriminatory rhetoric being pumped out of Washington. Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto also spoke at the event, saying that in Pittsburgh, they defend the Constitution, not executive orders. He was, of course, referring to Trump's order that led to the crackdown. Navarro said that the order has had a devastating effect on cities in Arizona. He claims that people aren't using hospitals because they fear they will be caught and deported. He also says that the order is disrupting families and affecting the school performance of children of undocumented immigrants. City officials are meeting with members of Congress today to discuss their concerns, which will then be dismissed and laughed at during a 2-martini lunch.
The Tohono O'odham Nation continues to be concerned about the sexy, delicious wall on the southern border. The tribe's Legislative Council approved a resolution last month to oppose the wall and called for closer collaboration with federal officials to improve border security. The National Congress of American Indians followed that up with their own resolution, which supports the Tohono O'odham decision and urges the federal government to negotiate with the tribe. Robert N. Clinton, a law professor at Arizona State University, says that the tribe has occupied this territory long before international borders and that the wall would split the tribe in two. Tohono land stretches across the border into Mexico. Opponents of the wall say that the wall will separate the people and that it will also cut off the path used by animals, some of which are endangered. The wall would also disrupt plant life that exists near the border. Rachel Rose Starks, a researcher at the University of Arizona, said that tribal nations are sovereign governments and that federal government must keep a good relationship with native leaders. She says that the Tohono leaders say that Trump did not consult with them about his plan for building a wall. Under an executive order passed in 2000 by then President Clinton, federal officials were forced to discuss and collaborate with tribes on issues that would impact them directly, including the border fence that was erected at the time. Starks and Clinton both think that the Tohono have a good chance to challenge, or a good case to challenge the federal government, although nothing has been filed yet.
A Phoenix immigration attorney is leading a campaign to boycott the export of corn from the U.S. to Mexico. Daniel Rodriguez organized the boycott called No Maíz Gringo in an attempt to push back against Donald Trump's proposed border tax against Mexican imports and his recent immigration crackdown. Rodriguez was inspired by the grape boycott led by activist Cesar Chavez in the 1960s and by the effectiveness of the boycotts organized around the time when SB 1070 was passed. He says that Arizona has led the fight against hate in anti-immigration legislation and that the state's citizens are used to fighting these types of policies. Next, the boycott's organizers will travel to corn-heavy states like Nebraska, Iowa, and Indiana to spread the message and gather support. It's already gotten the attention of Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, who said that agriculture is always the first target of a boycott against policies like Trump's, and that such a move could negatively impact farmers from his state. But farmers are mixed on their support for a boycott. Arizona corn farmer Gary Mortimer says that the boycott would have a devastating effect on corn prices, even though he doesn't export to Mexico. Currently, the U.S. produces 34% of the world's corn, according to the National Corn Growers Association. Mortimer said that it's important for the U.S. to continue leading the world in corn supply and that the boycott could potentially affect that. Wendy Spurlock of the National Corn Growers Association says that the Trump administration needs to understand how important corn is to our economy and be careful not to disrupt the supply. The organization was one of 130 food and agricultural groups that urged Trump to preserve and build upon NAFTA, the trade deal that links the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. On the campaign trail, Trump bashed NAFTA as being unfair to U.S. workers.
Arizona Democrats are blasting the newly revealed Republican alternative to the Affordable Care Act, popularly known as Obamacare. Representative Tom O'Halloran of Sedona says that it's time for Congress to work on a bipartisan solution because hundreds of thousands of the state's residents are expected to lose coverage. He was referring to a recently released report by the Congressional Budget Office finding that 24 million Americans would go uninsured if the new plan, which is being called the American Health Care Act, were to go into effect as it is currently written. Arizona Republicans have not yet weighed in on the legislation, but it has faced some opposition among congressional Republicans, particularly from the far right. The Arizona Democratic Party also released a statement calling the plan evidence of a deceptive presidency and saying that it puts a target on the backs of Arizona Republicans who supported the replacement. The CBO report also found that costs would hurt seniors and the poor the most because of the decrease in Medicaid funding. An earlier report also found that those earning more than $200,000 per year would get what amounts to a tax break due to the repeal of two taxes associated with the ACA. Arizona Democratic Party chair said that members of Congress are complicit in this disaster by fast-tracking legislation that leaves Arizonans to fend for themselves while the wealthy enjoy another tax break.
The Arizona Supreme Court has rejected a challenge by business groups hoping to overturn Prop 206, which raised minimum wage in the state. The Arizona Chamber of Commerce, along with a group of industry leaders, claimed that the law would lead to higher costs for elderly and disabled care, which would fall on the state. The Arizona Constitution requires that a funding source be included if there are going to be extra costs for the state. The chamber argued that the state pays contractors to perform caretaker services and would therefore lead to additional costs. Backers of Prop 206, including the Office of Attorney General Mark Brnovich, argued that the costs were indirect and would not require any new funding. But the defense argued there would be a minimum of $21 million in additional state costs created by the law in 2018 to cover costs associated with taking care of the elderly and the disabled. However, the court refused to keep the wage raise from going into effect. Jim Barton, one of the men backing Prop 206, said he was happy about the ruling but wasn't surprised because he doesn't believe that the Supreme Court are activists and that they follow the law. Chamber of Commerce President Glenn Hamer said that while he was disappointed in the ruling, he at least said it provides clarity for the state and its employees. He says that the state can now create a budget knowing that these additional costs will be expected. Prop 206 was approved by 58% of voters in November and immediately raised the state's minimum wage to $10 an hour. By 2020, the wage will rise to $12 an hour. But the chamber isn't giving up on destroying the will of the voters yet. They're now working on weakening the referendum process to disallow out-of-state money from being used on a referendum campaign. State Republicans are also looking to pass laws making it harder to gather signatures in order to get an initiative on the ballot. Arizona Democrats claim that these moves are using the legislature to bypass the will of the state's citizens. Republicans are also looking to propose a law that forces voters to scale a 50-foot fence topped with barbed wire in order to vote in a special election.
A federal judge has ruled that Arizona Border Patrol agents violated court orders when they failed to preserve surveillance footage for a lawsuit, claiming that they held migrants in inhumane conditions. U.S. District Judge David Burry granted a motion to hold agents in civil contempt over the video files, which were supposed to be handed over to the court. In June of 2016, the court found that the agents knew that the files were corrupted, but never alerted the ACLU, who were the plaintiffs in the case. The original case from 2015 claimed that the Border Patrol's Tucson sector held migrants in cells with filthy conditions and cold temperatures. Judge Burry said that the Border Patrol egregiously knew about the gaps in the video footage, but neglected to reveal this information to the court. The plaintiffs had requested that a third party work with them to produce the footage, but the judge also denied this request. The judge also sanctioned the Border Patrol for allegedly destroying the evidence and said that the agency's decisions were, quote, at best negligent and certainly willful. Judge Burry issued an injunction last year that required the Border Patrol to provide clean sleeping mats and the blankets for migrants who were held for more than 12 hours, a decision which the Border Patrol appealed but were turned down. The Border Patrol claims that it provided the migrants with basic human needs in accordance with its policies, including medical care, warmth, sanitation, food, and water. However, photos were eventually released showing inmates crammed into tiny cells and trash covering the floor and rusted toilets. In their defense, this is how the homes of most Border Patrol agents look.
And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5 on 20, we are undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We are going to give you the news as we see it, and we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves. So join us. Do it. Do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved. And if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, perhaps a pissed off Border Patrol agent, an upcoming event we should cover, or have any news for us, shoot an email to info@creativetucson.org. We are here for you, and we want to cover all stories from all points of view, so don't be strangers. Now in national and international news.
Another day, another ethics violation by a member of the Trump team. This time, Christopher Liddell, who was named as Trump's Director of Strategic Initiatives and whose strategy is to involve himself in a dizzying amount of conflicts of interest. Liddell's investment portfolio totaled between $3 and $4 million in companies that he's now dealing directly with as a member of the Trump cabinet. Federal records show that Liddell had investments in 18 companies when he began joining the Trumper in meetings with various CEOs. His investments included companies like Dell, Dow Chemical, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan Chase, Lockheed Martin, and Walmart, all of whom sat in on the same meetings. Must have been some great conversation going on in there, but Trump also brought Liddell to meet with CEOs of Ford, General Motors, and Fiat Chrysler, all companies in which Liddell has investments. All of this was revealed when Liddell submitted paperwork to the White House ethics officer before he took the position. He has since sought to divest his holdings, but it's unclear whether he sold his shares. But that didn't stop the group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics from filing a complaint against Liddell, charging him with violating federal conflict of interest law, which would be a criminal offense. The White House responded to the charge claiming that, quote, Mr. Liddell has been working with the Office of the White House Counsel to ensure he is fully compliant with his legal and ethical obligations. In other words, don't worry about it.
A coalition that's cited as supporting the new Republican healthcare legislation has been revealed to be not much more than a website. The Intercept investigated the One Nation Health Coalition, who is frequently mentioned by Republican lawmakers as supporting the American Health Care Act, the name for the Affordable Care Act replacement. The group released a statement on Monday expressing their support for the bill, saying that it's built on the, quote, ABCs of success, and that it will lower costs and expand access. Lately, the group has also been cited on CNN, MSNBC, and the Wall Street Journal, along with Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who mentioned One Nation as one of 4 groups that support the law. But when The Intercept looked into the group, they found that the organization had not released a membership list yet and only registered their foundation documents last Tuesday, less than 24 hours before the healthcare bill was released. Their website is also sparse on details, as its About page only contains a 1-page description of the group and no information about individuals involved with One Nation. The site also contains stock images, which The Intercept found on Getty Images for $12. So it appears as though One Nation is nothing more than a fake advocacy group created to manufacture support for Trump Care. Yes, we're calling it Trump Care now. So who created the site? Well, it appears as though lobbyists for the insurance industry might have something to do with it. David Hopp is a former health insurance lobbyist and senior advisor for One Nation, who did not respond to requests for comment. The governing board for the group includes David Wilson, who was CEO of Asset Health, who provides insurance firms with health management services, whatever that means. The board also includes Daniel Perrin, who is president of the HSA Coalition, an organization backed by insurance companies who spread the gospel of health savings accounts, which are included in the American Health Care Act. The news that One Nation is fake prompted criticism from the Society for the Eradication of Bullshit in Politics, a group that we made up 10 minutes ago, and that's just as legitimate as One Nation Health Coalition.
The Trumpinator began to roll back carbon pollution emission standards for vehicles today as he groveled in front of automakers in Detroit. Trump will direct the EPA to review fuel efficiency standards, which require that cars run on over 54 miles per gallon of gas by 2025. This was ordered by the Obama administration in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 6 billion tons over the lifetime of new vehicles and save 2 million gallons of oil per day. In the final month of Obama's presidency, the EPA concluded that automakers were well positioned to hit their mark. However, since Trump's election, automakers have said that standards are too extreme and won't be possible with the current habits of U.S. car buyers. White House officials say that automakers feel like the Obama administration rammed the rules down their throats and that the regulations are burdensome. However, Christy Iguski, who is a climate program associate at the World Resources Institute, says that the auto industry has expected the emission standards for the past 4 years. She points to multiple car models such as the Chevy Volt and Spark and the Toyota Prius, who are already matching the 2025 levels. If Trump does end up rolling back the standards, American consumers would also lose out because of fuel costs. The Obama standards would save an average of $8,000 in gas costs over the lifetime of a new car. But the decision surely has nothing to do with our Secretary of State being the former CEO of the largest oil company. And it definitely has nothing to do with Trump wanting to bribe auto companies into staying in the U.S. and not crossing the big, beautiful wall into Mexico. Executives at General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler applauded Trump's decision, then raised their glasses in a toast before downing goblets full of Texas crude.
Ew. The revolving door between the banking industry and government just got a little greasier. The American Bankers Association has started taking applications for a new school that will train bankers to go into government service. The ABA, the largest banking lobbying group, will hold a, quote, comprehensive 2-day program in Washington, D.C. because it only takes 2 days to learn how to grovel in front of lobbyists and nail a 20-foot putt. The ABA says that the program will help the banker/politicians to conduct research, fill out paperwork, and get out the vote, which we can only assume means solicit for campaign donations. As if the ABA had to mention it, the classes will also teach the future targets of bribery probes how to raise money. When asked why the ABA established the program, they said it's part of an effort to create a, quote, pro-growth policy environment, which is certainly the fanciest sounding euphemism for bribery I've ever heard. This would presumably mean that the bankers would look to ease regulation on the banking industry, such as the Dodd-Frank Act, and aim to control who is appointed to positions at the SEC and the FTC. But they're already pretty good at that anyway. Last year, the ABA spent close to $10 million on political causes, according to Top Secrets. This accounts for twice as much money as the number 2 spenders, Citigroup and Wells Fargo, who will certainly have some ABA university graduates in the future.
The mayor of a Seattle suburb is aiming to sue the manufacturer of OxyContin as a way to tackle the opioid epidemic in the U.S. Mayor Ray Stevenson of Everett, Washington, has increased patrols, hired social workers to ride with police officers, and advocated for permanent housing for the homeless in efforts to combat the drug abuse in the city. He is suing Purdue Pharma, the company that makes OxyContin, alleging that the company knowingly allowed pills to be introduced to the black market in the city. Stevenson says that Purdue did nothing to stop the release of the pills and should be held accountable for the damage caused in the community. The lawsuit is currently in federal court in Seattle and accuses Purdue of selling pills to, quote, suspicious pharmacies and physicians and enabling the illegal diversion of OxyContin into the black market. So far, the lawsuit does not specify how much money the city is seeking, but Stevenson said that the company has stretched the city's resources, including everything from funding for first responders and park crews to clean up used syringes. In response, Purdue said that they, quote, deeply are troubled by the misuse of the medication, but claims that its products account for less than 2% of all prescribed medications and that they make efforts to protect its users. In 2007, Purdue was ordered to pay more than $630 million to the federal government for misrepresenting the potential for addiction in its products. Stevenson says that Purdue helped fuel a heroin crisis as users ditched OxyContin for the cheaper heroin substitute. Between 2011 and 2013, 1 in 5 overdose deaths were in the Everett area. Purdue officials said that Stevenson was blowing the issue out of proportion and sounds like he's full of anxiety, which he should really take something for.
The Obama administration spent $36 million on lawsuits to keep information secret, according to an Associated Press report. The amount was spent in legal costs to defend the administration's refusal to hand over information as part of Freedom of Information Act requests made by various media outlets. The top media companies that made FOIA requests were the New York Times, the Associated Press, and the Center for Public Integrity. The most recent payout was to the Associated Press, who received over $150,000 from the federal government to cover legal costs for a request relating to Hillary Clinton's time as Secretary of State. The AP has additional pending lawsuits against the FBI for records relating to a case of an FBI agent impersonating an AP journalist. This was during a criminal investigation when the AP was trying to find out how much the government paid to have an iPhone hacked, which belonged to the San Bernardino shooters. Out of the $36 million in legal costs, the Justice Department accounted for $12 million, Homeland Security accounted for over $6 million, and the Pentagon paid almost $5 million. The Obama administration touted themselves as the most transparent in history, which is both true and not true. The administration did receive the most FOIA requests of any in history, with a record of 788,000 requests, and spent $478 million answering the requests. They employed over 4,000 employees across 100 federal agencies to handle the requests. At the same time, the Obama administration frequently came under fire for its secrecy, particularly in the matter of the mass surveillance program exposed by Edward Snowden in 2011. It remains to be seen if the FOIA requests will be taken seriously under the Trump administration, but all signs are leaning toward no. According to a recent Politico report, the Trump White House has been overtaken by a state of panic over leaks and fears of surveillance among staffers. Rather than the beacon of openness that Trump claimed he would be, he's looking a lot more like Nixon without the constant sweating.
And here's an example of some truly bad vibrations, man. A Canadian manufacturer who makes a vibrator called the WeVibe was hit with a $3.75 million class action lawsuit, charging that the company was collecting data on when and how the sex toy was used. Standard Innovations, the maker of the WeVibe, settled the case out of court on Monday, but admitted no wrongdoing. The vibrator includes a Bluetooth-enabled device that allows users to log on to the WeConnect app, which can be controlled by a smartphone. The app allows users to vary rhythms and patterns and for someone in the room to control the device. Since the app's 2014 release, users have been concerned that sex toys connected to the internet can be hacked. The lawsuit filed last September accused the company of collecting information about how often and with what settings the vibrator was used. Users claimed that they never agreed to the data collection, although Standard Innovations disagreed, claiming that users consented to a user agreement, which was triggered at the moment of orgasm. An executive at Standard Innovations said that users shouldn't be surprised that a group of guys at an app development company weren't able to satisfy a woman.
Ow!
This was Sean Madrid.
And Luke Goodhart for 5 on 20 News. Next up, Sophie Gibson Rush is on one about premature death proclamations. Good night, Tucson.
pop is karaoke, EDM is all light shows. I don't think we can chalk up his comments to back pain or geriatric griping, because every news outlet from The Atlantic to Noisy to NPR to CNN has declared some aspect of the music industry dying or dead. Move down the internet pyramid to the army of music bloggers vying for attention online, and you get the picture that almost every sound, band, genre, platform, or label is on its deathbed. Let's not even start on the trolls who paint the music industry as an empty wasteland where vultures circle the last living cannibal. Proclaiming the death of an art form is as old as art. Classical music, for instance, has been dying its whole life. Every time it changes, the establishment worries its pearls and calls the mortuary. You can track this through history. Theater has been kicking the bucket consistently since the Greeks. Poetry died when we ditched verse, film when we got TVs. The music industry is a fast-moving one, and apparently it leaves a trail of bodies in its wake. I spent some time sifting through the internet's feeding frenzy, and I've compiled a list to honor the fallen. Among the dead, the CD, vinyl, tapes, iTunes, illegal downloading, small venues, medium venues, large venues, live music. And here are the headlines on that one. Local live music is dead. 5 reasons why live music is dead. Australia's live music is quickly becoming a dead art. Is San Francisco's music scene dead? Oh, the full-length album. And here are the headlines. In 2016, in memoriam, the album is dead. Long live the album. The album is dead, but it's been bleeding out since 1991. The album is not dead, yet. The album is dead. Long live playlists. Oh, but that's a bummer, because streaming is dead too. Read, at this rate, music downloads will be dead by 2020 by Music Business Worldwide. Or, The Life of Pablo, the death of streaming music as we know it, at Vice. Radio? Radio was totally dead 15 years ago, apparently. But now journalists are scrambling to write about its magnificent, zombie-rific comeback. Read, is radio dead? The truth behind the state of the radio. And no, radio isn't dead. In fact, it's doing better than ever. But charts. Charts are most definitely dead. The top 20 singles chart bit the dust when Ed Sheeran destroyed it with 16 hits. Top 40 isn't far behind. So we can move on to genres now. Punk headlines, the slow death of punk, the year punk died, the death and life of punk, the last subculture, an excellent essay by Dylan Clark. Heavy metal, the slow death of heavy metal. Is heavy metal a dying genre? The death rattle of heavy metal. Oh, classical music again. Classical music sales decline. Is classical on death's door? Classical music is dying, and that's the best thing for classical music. Oh, and here are all the reasons why classical music is a dead genre. The Who's Roger Daltrey declared, rock is dead, rap is all that matters. But apparently, rap is dead, according to EliteDaily.com, who asks, critics are crying, the decline of rap. Is hip-hop really dead? Oh, grunge is dead. But I think Nirvana said that first. That's swagger, to invent a genre and to declare it dead. And Moby told Salon that pop music is a dying industry, so pop snuffed it, folk has croaked, techno and house popped their clogs, and country has gone to a farm upstate. The fate of the music industry as a whole leads to the most hysterical headlines of them all. My favorite, how one generation single-handedly was able to kill the music industry. Legendary producer Quincy Jones says there is no music industry. Steve Albini, the music industry is a parasite and copyright is dead. Oh, is music dead? Thoughts on the music industry after South by Southwest 2015. Why music is dying. Spotify CEO claims the music industry would be dead without Spotify. And the music industry is dead, so now let's move on from The Atlantic. Yes, please, let's. Everything has been dying for so long. Seemed like someone would just take it out back and put it out of its misery. Look around. If all this is dying, Tucson is populated by the undead. Albums, local live music in a range of genres, and a small but hot recording and producing industry have the opportunity to thrive here. While the dramatic and jaded herald the death of an industry, I see life all around me. Talking about what's dead is the wrong conversation. Really, what we should be asking is what's next? That's it for today, Tucson. I'll see you here next week.